Hello and welcome. I'm Julia Somerville and I'm in Accounting 311 Section 2. I'm going to be analyzing 3 different home stores for my database research project. The companies I've selected are retail store Bed Bath & Beyond, retail store Kirkland's, and online retailer Wayfair. The data I used to calculate these ratios was all retrieved from Wharton Research Data Services website. I'm going to begin by sharing a brief history of each company. Bed Bath & Beyond was founded in New Jersey in 1971 by duo Warren Eisenberg and Leonard Feinstein. During the next 10 years, the company opened 17 stores throughout the greater New York area and California. By the 1980s, Bed Bath & Beyond was seeing increased competition. This brought the opening of more Bed Bath & Beyond locations and their first superstores. In 1987, the company decided to change their name from Bed & Bath to Bed Bath & Beyond. In June of 1992, the company made the decision to file for an IPO, or initial public offering. This is the switch from private ownership to public. By the year 2000, Bed Bath & Beyond had opened 311 stores in 43 states. In 2002, Bed Bath & Beyond began purchasing other retailers. This began with the purchase of beauty retailer Harmons. By the year 2012, they had purchased 4 additional retailers. Bed Bath & Beyond's early competitors, such as Linen Synthex, were beginning to go out of business. Bed Bath & Beyond is still a popular home store today with a well-known tagline, Home Happier. The store Kirkland's was founded in Jackson, Tennessee in 1966 by Carl Kirkland. Kirkland's was originally opened as a gift shop in the Old Hickory Mall of Jackson, Tennessee. Carl Kirkland's cousin, Robert, was equally interested in the business world. In the late 1970s, the pair began traveling abroad in search of one-of-a-kind products for the shop. In coming years, Kirkland's made the transition from selling gifts to selling home decor. Come 2005, Kirkland's stores began detaching from shopping malls and transitioning to out-of-mall locations such as shopping centers. This was more accessible for the sale of home decor and furniture. Today, Kirkland's has 374 stores in 35 states. Kirkland's is headquartered in Nashville in their founding state of Tennessee. The store operates under the slogan, Bring Happiness Home. Wayfair was founded by high school duo Steve Conine and Niraj Shah. The duo attended Cornell University as engineering students but took interest in an entrepreneurism course during their final semester. This sparked their business plan. In 2002, the duo founded Wayfair out of a spare bedroom in Steve's house. They started out selling stereo racks online. Conine and Shaw began selling other items such as barstool, birdhouses, etc. on other separate small websites. They had over 250 standalone sites before finally merging into one e-commerce destination. The duo made the merge in 2011 and named it Wayfair. Wayfair was a quick success with $600 million in revenue being earned in just 1 year. The online retailer is now headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts with operations in 2 continents. Wayfair offers more than 22 million products with a fitting tagline, A Zillion Things Home. The first ratio I'm going to be sharing is the current ratio. Current ratio is current assets divided by current liabilities. This measures the liquidity of a company. The higher the ratio, the higher the liquidity. All 3 companies show a decent current ratio as their ratios primarily stay between the numbers 1 and 2. These are ideal numbers for this ratio. However, Kirkland's and Wayfair do have some years' current ratios below 1, which can be a sign they don't have sufficient liquidity. Judging by the table and graph, Bed Bath & Beyond is in the best standing for liquidity. Next, I am going to share current cash debt coverage. This is another liquidity ratio, measuring net cash provided from operating activities by average current liabilities. Once again, a higher ratio means higher liquidity. However, a ratio of 1 is considered to be good. As you can see on the graph, none of these companies have reached 1 in the last 5 years. Kirkland's had the peak ratio in 2016 at 0.77, but quickly plummeted to the negatives afterwards. The negative ratios shown by Kirkland's and Wayfair could be a sign they're lacking income from operations. This indicates they may not be able to pay their current liabilities. So, in terms of liquidity, Bed Bath & Beyond is in the best shape. For their current ratio, they stayed between 1.5 and 2, the ideal numbers for that ratio. For their current cash debt coverage, they stay between 0.26 and 0.54. Though these may not be ideal numbers for this ratio, it's better than having a number below 0, which Kirkland's and Wayfair both displayed. With that being said, Bed Bath & Beyond is in the best standing for liquidity based off of my calculations. This means they're in good financial standing and are at a lower risk of not being able to meet their financial obligations. The next ratio I computed was inventory turnover. The formula for inventory turnover is cost of goods sold over average inventory. Inventory turnover is how many times inventory is sold in a year. It calculates how well a company is managing their sales of inventory. A good inventory ratio is considered between 5 and 10. Looking at the graph, you see Bed Bath & Beyond is a bit below that. This can mean low sales, excessive inventory, or both. Kirkland's, on the other hand, stays right around 5, meaning they're in good shape. Now, let's address the extremely high inventory turnover ratios I've calculated for Wayfair. Looking at the graph and table, you see Wayfair's numbers ranging from the 80s to mid-100s. Super high inventory turnovers are seen more frequently in online retailers. These high numbers mean the company is restocking often. This is a dangerous game for retailers to play as it puts them at risk of an inventory shortage. However, in Wayfair's case, the high numbers aren't a bad thing. Wayfair is in the top 7 online retailers in the United States, so the need for frequent restocking is a given. It can be argued that the high ratio means Wayfair is not managing their assets well, but this is debunked by their asset turnover. Here are my calculations for asset turnover. This is computed by dividing net sales by average total assets. It measures how well assets are utilized to generate sales. In retail, an ideal asset turnover ratio is above 2. Bed Bath & Beyond displays numbers close to 2, but you can see they never quite reach 2. Kirkland's asset turnovers are above 2 for 4 of the 5 years. Wayfair's ratios once again stand out as much higher, ranging from 3 to almost 5. Wayfair has really good numbers for this ratio. So in terms of management efficiency or activity, Wayfair is in the best shape. With high inventory turnover and asset turnover ratios, Wayfair shows their success in inventory and sales. My next calculation was a profitability ratio, the profit margin of sales. For this ratio, I divided net income by net sales to measure income generated by each dollar of sales. All 3 companies for all 5 years show pretty poor ratios. Kirkland's is in the best shape with only 1 negative ratio, but still nowhere close to any ideal numbers. Here I calculated net income divided by average total assets to find the return on assets ratio. This ratio finds the overall asset profitability. A good return on assets is considered to be above 5%. The only time we see a percentage above 5 is from Bed Bath & Beyond in 2015 and 2016 before their ratios dropped into the negatives. To decide which company was in the best financial health in terms of ROA, I averaged the 5 years of ratios together. Bed Bath & Beyond has the highest average ROA at positive 2.9%. Here I calculated return on common stockholders' equity. I did this by subtracting preferred dividends from net income and dividing that number by average stockholders' equity. This is utilized to measure profitability of owners' investments. A poor ratio is considered below 10%. This graph shows Kirkland's is below 10% for all 5 years. The other 2 companies were a bit sporadic as they had years in the negatives and years where they passed 100%. After averaging the ratios for each company, Bed Bath & Beyond proved to be in better financial health for this ratio than the other 2 companies. Here are my earnings per share ratios. These measure net income earned on each share of common stock. Looking at the graph, you can see some EPS ratios drop below 0. Negative EPS means negative earnings. This means 4 of the 5 years for Wayfair were in the negatives on accounting profits. The other 2 companies, however, have decent numbers for this ratio. Though Bed Bath & Beyond dips into the negatives in 2019, they still displayed the strongest EPS ratios overall. Here we have price-earning ratios, calculated by dividing market price per share by earnings per share. The zeros you see are a result of negative earnings per share. This rules Wayfair out of this ratio. Price-earnings ratios can be too high or too low. A PE surpassing 20 can mean the stock's price is overvalued, and the company expected to make more than they did. This is a likely scenario for Kirkland's based off of their numbers. Bed Bath & Beyond's PE ratios are slightly lower than ideal, but still best out of the three. Here are the calculated payout ratios, or cash dividends over net income. This is my final profitability ratio. This wasn't the best kind of ratio for me to use to compare, as Kirkland's and Wayfair paid no cash dividends in these 5 years. However, evaluating Bed Bath & Beyond's payout ratios was interesting, as they were a bit sporadic. They go from decent ratios in 2015 and 16 to negative ratios in 2017 and 18, which is typically a bad sign. In turn, their 2019 ratio is above 100%, meaning they will pay out more dividends than they are earning, which puts them at risk of bad financial health. So, despite Bed Bath & Beyond's poor payout ratios, they are still in better overall financial standing for profitability. These ratios calculated to determine profitability seem to have some inconsistency to them. However, I was able to conclude that Wayfair did not have the greatest profit ratios. Kirkland's and Bed Bath & Beyond had some poor performing years in ratios, but I would still not say either company is in awful standing. Here I'm moving into my first ratio I use to calculate leverage or coverage. Debt to asset ratio is calculated by dividing total liabilities by total assets in order to measure the percentage of total assets provided by creditors. So for this ratio, we want to see lower percentages, such as 40% or lower, to signify strong financial structure. However, any ratio below 1 is considered good or less risky. From 2017 to 19, Wayfair is above 1, meaning they're in that high risk zone. The other two companies, however, remain below 1. We don't see any ratios lower than 40%, but the ratios displayed by Kirkland's and Bed Bath & Beyond suggest good structure financially and low risk. Next, I calculated cash debt coverage. Cash debt coverage is net cash provided by operating activities divided by average total liabilities. This calculates a company's ability to repay its total liabilities. For this ratio, you want to see higher numbers. Lower numbers imply potential future financial problems for the company, as they may not be able to pay their debts. On the graph, you see the highest cash debt coverage ratio from Kirkland's in 2016. However, this does not mean they're in the best standing for this ratio. After that peak, their ratios crash and eventually hit below 0. Wayfair shows a similar scenario. Bed Bath & Beyond remains steady on their cash debt coverage ratios through the years. Their numbers are not significantly high, but they're not bad ratios. This puts Bed Bath & Beyond in the best standing for this ratio. This graph shows the calculated book value per share. These ratios were calculated by taking common stockholders' equity and dividing it by outstanding shares. The ratios measure how much each share would receive if the company were liquidated at the amounts reported on the balance sheet. The graph shows each company remaining fairly steadily for this ratio each year. You see the highest average book value per share from Bed Bath & Beyond and the lowest average book value per share from Wayfair. If a company's book value per share is higher than the company's share price, the stock of the company may be undervalued. However, this is not the case for any of these three companies. This graph displays my final calculation, free cash flow ratios. This ratio is found by subtracting capital expenditures from net cash provided by operating activities. Cash dividends are subtracted as well if they are present for the company. A high number for this ratio is preferred. The high number indicates there's extra cash to expand, pay dividends, reduce debt, etc. According to this data, Bed Bath & Beyond is putting out the highest numbers for this ratio. This makes their company the best option under this ratio. To conclude the financial ratios that help to determine company leverage, I found Wayfair once again in pretty bad shape. This could be a result of greater cost of borrowing money than return. This is also relevant to the negative stockholders' equity Wayfair had for 3 of their 5 years. Kirkland's and Bed Bath & Beyond, on the other hand, had good ratios for all 4 calculations I made. If I had to make the call, I would say Bed Bath & Beyond is in the best overall leverage. So, to conclude, all 3 companies had their strong ratios and their weak ratios. Bed Bath & Beyond had the strongest liquidity, profitability, and leverage ratios, whereas Wayfair displayed strength in their activity ratios. Kirkland's didn't lead in any of the 4 categories, but they did lead in a few ratios and never showed any too dangerous ratios. To answer the question, are these companies in good financial health? I would say yes, all 3 companies are. I'll begin with addressing Kirkland's. I wasn't shocked to see how low their balance sheet numbers were in comparison to the other 2 companies, as I knew Kirkland's was a significantly smaller company than the others. However, I was pleasantly surprised to see they held up well with good ratios that were closely comparable to the other 2 companies. The ratios Kirkland's displayed that stood out to me as poor were their current cash debt coverage ratio and return on common stockholders' equity ratio. Other than those 2, their companies were either average or good. Kirkland seems to be doing well financially, with some visible improvements to their ratios in more recent years. For Wayfair, I was surprised about the lack of profitability and liquidity. Being an online company, I assumed I would see higher numbers for those ratios. I was not shocked to see their extremely high activity ratios, as they are a leading online retailer in the United States, and in an era of increasing technology, they are bound to be a success. I was shocked at some of their bad ratios, as I genuinely assumed Wayfair would be in the lead in every category. Their ratios did differ a lot from the other companies, but I have to remember to consider they are operating solely online, whereas the other companies do not. Despite these ratios, Wayfair is still a success and is not in bad financial health. Finally, Bed Bath & Beyond led in most of the ratios I calculated. I was surprised to see this, as they have experienced many store shutdowns in the past year. However, based on these pre-COVID ratios, Bed Bath & Beyond was doing very well financially. They had the best results for most categories and the most ratios, making it easy to say they are in the best financial standing of these 3 companies. Thank you for watching. Here are a list of the websites I utilized for my research of company history and data collection.